Right, then we're good to go?
We're good to go. How you getting on?
All right.
Good?
It's nice being on someone else's podcast,
I bet
mate.
it is, yeah, it's quite nice. I like when I'm on someone else's pod, I can just relax a little bit. And the pod I did with you the other week, man, it's the best pod I've ever done.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I came away from it and I was like, what do you think? He was like, it was really good.
Yeah.
Because I was just so relaxed. And I know you podcast as well, so I'll let you introduce yourself. So.
Yeah, so I started Spin Justice, the Spin Justice podcast, sort of like 4 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's really, really new still, but it's off the back of a few different things, you know, working within the police for 20 years, sort of from the age of 18, and then leaving there in 2022, and then starting what was just a little bit of a hobby of indoor cycling, so otherwise known as spin.
Yeah.
When I left the police, I always sort of wanted to go into the podcasting, but I don't know, there was something holding me back. I really wanted to focus on injustice, but there was just something that I thought, it's just not the right time at the minute, I don't know, but I didn't do it anyway. Started teaching spin, and it went from doing like one class a week for 45 minutes to doing 7 classes a week. It just got that popular that I now do 7 classes a week. So that sort of took over for a little bit. But the podcast idea was always in the back of my head. So I was like, oh, I'm not letting this go. And I think, you know, when you think about something every day, you know that that's what you're gravitating towards.
Yeah, like it's an obsession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it every day, but I just didn't really know how to get there. So obviously, sort of September last year, 24, just took that leap and went live in October.
So what was like the initial thing? Because I know what I did, you know, when I started the PIK. What was like the initial step you took? Did you just contact the studio, or?
Funny enough, I set up an Instagram account.
Okay.
Eventually thought, right, Spin Justice. One day it just came to me because I was teaching the spin. I wanted to talk about injustice, and originally I'd bought a domain name through Google and stuff called The Injustice of It All, but it never really, you know, I never did anything more than that. Like, I knew I really wanted to talk about the injustice, but didn't really get anywhere. But then one day, like we were just saying, when we relax, things come to us.
Yeah.
I relaxed one day, and then the word Spin Justice came to me, and I thought, oh, that's it, I'm going to go with that. So sort of September-ish last year, I created an Instagram. So I've got my B31 Spin, which is my indoor cycling account, and then the Spin Justice account. And I noticed, you know, you can see people looking at your stories.
Yeah.
I saw someone looking at my stories, and when I clicked on, it was podcast content creators, and I was like, it's as if they've read my mind.
Yeah.
How, you know, so I had a look on the socials, and it was Carl, who runs the Birmingham Content Studio. So I ended up having a chat with him on the phone, to then arranging to go in and see him.
Good. And
have a look at the studio. So that's sort of how it got there, because I had actually recorded an episode in my own house.
Right.
With Dave, who you know.
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
No, it never went out.
Right. So I've seen the pod with Dave.
Yeah. So we recorded it, but it was audio only. And then when I found Carl in the studio and everything else, we recorded that one again.
Yeah.
So the one with Dave, was recorded 3 times.
Yeah.
Because there was an issue with the hard drive.
Oh, okay.
So I had to actually get him back in again.
I did that, and Ben Hatchett.
Yeah.
I recorded a podcast with Ben Hatchett 3 times, to the point where I was like, is this meant to be happening?
Yeah.
Like, am I just not meant to do this pod? You know, because he was early in treatment. He'd just finished treatment. You know, he'd been through a lot. He'd come to Thailand, and I was just like, I have a faith and I reference God all the time, and like, am I not meant to be doing this? You know, and sometimes I'm just meant to let. Anyway, I forced my will. I'm trying to get him back on now because he's doing something. Anyway, so I like the setup. You've got so spin.justice.
Well, it's just Spin Justice.
Spin Justice.
Yeah, I think I just had to add a dot in there at some point for
I like the setup, and you came onto my radar probably about probably about 2 months ago. And of course, you know, you see another pod straight away and you're like, oh, it's another pod. What are they doing? You know, so there's the ego straight away. There's the ego. And then I, you know, I heard, I watched a few of the pods. I quite like what you were doing. And then I spoke to Aaron and he was like, yeah, we're going to do some collab work. I was like, yeah, cool. By that time, I was just like, there's enough to go round. You know, we were doing our thing. And I was like, and your angle is probably slightly, well, the look's slightly different, the angle's slightly different.
Yeah, and do you know what? Everyone's got their own niche.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing their own thing.
Yeah.
I've got a friend that's a dog walker and there was another dog walker in the area and I was like, mate, there's enough dogs.
Yeah, I
Don't
think
sweat it.
it's about personality as well, isn't it? You know, people, everyone will click.
Yeah.
With something else. I watched some of your pods. I was like, she's a bit ferocious.
Oh yeah.
She's not holding back.
I don't.
You know, and I like that approach. You know, that really direct. Yeah, it's good. I tend to do it.
I can't hide it. You know, it's just I've just found if you just be who you are.
Yeah.
I don't edit anything out. I swear a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it's just the way I am.
I remember when I spoke to you on the phone, because we had a little call. We've had a couple of calls actually.
Yeah.
Just really got into some good conversations. And you said I was a police officer for 20 years, and I went, oh yeah, I can see that now.
Well, I wasn't a police officer. I worked within the police system, so I was in custody for 13, and then I was an investigator on the side.
Yeah.
But yeah, I worked within that environment for 20 years.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So what initially made you go and think, oh, I'm gonna, because I've worked in criminal justice and it wasn't something that I got into, and I suppose when I crossed over to the side of working with the police, alongside the police and probation, what I realised was pretty fucking corrupt. In terms, and I don't mean like, we're not talking scandal corruption. You know, people, they were just normal people, and what I'd seen, you know, yeah.
It didn't meet your expectations.
Absolutely not. No. I realised that, and I suppose I'll let you answer that question. I'm just talking.
Well, I think why I got into it, it was purely because I was working in an office in town and I was made redundant, and it was back in the day where the Birmingham Mail, which was called the Evening Mail then, had the jobs in the paper every Thursday, and I was just circling loads of jobs and applying to loads of different jobs, and one come up, custody officer for West Midlands Police, shift work, and it was just one that I applied for, you know, and I went and I did some sort of tests, medicals, and sort of like some basic tests to get in. And it was pretty much like straight away, they just came back to me and they were like, yeah, like, you're in, kind of thing. Yeah. And I mean, these days, it's quite hard to get into that line of work. But back then, it was just pretty easy. So I was 18, you know, I was an 18-year-old girl, we were still living at home. And I just sort of like went into working in custody, and I stayed there for 13 years. Wow. Yeah. So it wasn't like, oh, it's all I've ever wanted. I just needed a job.
From what I saw and from what I know, you know, and I'm just kind of thinking of the time, and I suppose I'm trying to word this right. Trying to think of the kind of work ethic of people. That's probably not the right word. The culture. That's the right word.
Yeah, it was definitely a different culture then.
Yeah. And for a young 18-year-old girl, being predominantly surrounded by men, what was that like?
I thrive in that environment, to be honest. I work better with men.
Yeah.
I've got brothers.
Okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I've got my girlfriends very much, but I get on well in that environment. I get on well in the gym. I get on well, like, you know, going from custody, I went on to homicide again. Not male dominated on that department, but I get on well. You know, I like having the banter. Yeah. It's just the way I am. Okay. So I will thrive in that environment.
What, you know, it's probably hard for you to comment, you know, I suppose. Did you see people that didn't necessarily, because I can absolutely see that you would thrive in that environment. You would, and if someone went too far, you'd say, yeah, that's enough.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but I suppose I have seen people where they haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's in a lot of places now, and don't forget the culture has changed a lot, hasn't it? So things that were acceptable back then are not acceptable now.
Yes.
And that's in every line of work.
Yeah, of course, yeah, it's not just there.
Yeah, so I think that's just come with a culture shift.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm a bit of a loudmouth, so if there was something going on that I weren't happy with, I'm not scared to speak out.
Yeah.
Probably at the age of 18, I might have been a bit more meek and mild, but not much, you know.
I suppose, yeah, if you've got brothers, so you kind of cut your teeth, so to speak, with those, and you kind of knew how to handle
Yeah, and I just think, nowadays, you learn more, don't you? You know, I'm 40 in a couple of months, so I feel like now, at this age, I'm very comfortable with who I am. I'm very confident with where I'm going, and I'm definitely not doing anything I don't want to do, or, you know. But it's taken me a while to get to that level of confidence. So I don't think that was always there, you know, especially at the age of 18.
No. And I think definitely. We kind of think at that age, we know who we are, and we know.
Oh, but we don't.
And then I get to 40 and I'm like, no, I'm all right.
Yeah, we're all right now.
Yeah.
But when we look back then, you know, we had a lot of learning to do.
Yeah.
And I was definitely the same.
It's I wish I knew now what I knew then.
Oh, don't we all? Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I suppose, you know, my background is addiction. So you must have seen a lot of that in custody.
Awful lot of it, yeah.
And you know, I've met some really nice coppers, lovely custody officers, you know, if you like, who have really taken care of me. And yeah, I think that's probably changed, you know, kind of how we look after people and that kind of welfare in custody.
Did you ever get locked up in the West Mids?
No.
I just wondered if our paths had ever crossed.
No, I was pretty good.
Sometimes, you never know.
I was pretty good by the time I got here. Norfolk, Suffolk Police, I didn't like them. They have these PIK centres, PIC, Police Investigation Centres.
Right.
Huge, you know, units.
Oh, like super blocks.
60 cells, you know.
They've got them here now.
Yeah, and they come in from all over. And I think because of the area, it was a rural area, a lot of the officers were firearms trained.
Okay.
Because it being rural,
Yeah.
and so you know, most people, I suppose it's countryside, so most people had. So they would come in quite heavy. Do you know what I mean? And just that dominance of.
Yeah.
I shouldn't get nicked, should I really? It happens.
In the past.
No, and then, you know, most of my background was just silly, you know, drug crime, really. Do you know what I mean? So.
What was it mainly involving, like shoplifting and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Some of the custody charges was really good. I'd get there, you know, there'd be 10 bottles of spirits, some cheese and some bacon.
Something you could sell, yeah.
And they'd say, "You're going to cough to it, yeah." Straight into it, interview, get them out.
Yeah.
Because they kind of knew that, you know, and 45 minutes, I think, was the quickest I was in and out.
Nice.
Which was nice.
What year are we talking now? Cause
I don't know. 2015, 2016 would be the last. Yeah, 2016 was the last time. 2018 was the last time I went to court.
Okay, so talking 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years ago, yeah.
Which is not bad really, because I suppose that kind of custody procedure, an in and out custody procedure, was more, you know, it was the norm back sort of like in the early 2000s when I was working in there. But it seemed to change a little bit as time went on, and
it's about 10 hours, isn't it now?
yeah, and CPS, you used to have to go to CPS for everything, so you'd have to wait all the time. So it sort of changed a little bit, didn't it? In my opinion, the good days were like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
It was a good environment to work in.
Yeah.
And that's not, how can I put it? I mean, this is going to sound like this, well, I'll explain. CCTV came in probably about 2010.
Yes.
And that sort of changed things. And it wasn't that anything needed to be hidden. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to have to behave now, because we didn't do anything wrong anyway. But that really sort of changed things.
What do you think that was?
I don't know.
Is it just, I suppose, if I'm hearing you right on the CCTV thing, you know, it's just a layer of evidence that they had to then get, and then you have to get permission, or is that where
Yeah,
you're
I
going
mean,
with
it just felt sort of like a little bit more like a Big Brother kind of thing, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, they're everywhere now, because we're sort of like 15 years on from that.
Yeah.
But at the time, I remember sort of that being a real pivotal point of working in there and thinking, you know, for the last however many years.
Are you talking about CCTV in custody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In custody blocks,
Yeah,
in your work environment, being watched working,
Yeah.
you know, and like I say, it weren't like we were doing anything wrong, but all of a sudden there's cameras everywhere, and yeah, it just sort of felt like that was a bit of a change. But I don't know if that maybe was around the time I had my first son as well, so things were changing for me.
I was just thinking that when you said it wasn't like they were doing anything wrong, it wasn't my experience.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't doing anything wrong, I'll tell you that. I enjoyed working in there for the majority.
Yeah. The occasional little dig you'd get, you know, or
I
just,
wouldn't dig anyone.
No, but and you know, I don't know if you're gonna go that far, but it happened.
Yeah,
You know,
I can believe it.
Especially as a gobby teenager, you know, I got the odd slap here and there from a police officer.
Yeah.
More the older ones.
The old sweats. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they, you know, especially as a youth, you know, you would definitely get a slap.
Yeah, I wonder if that's got anything to do with your size and being sort of like, because you are a big lad, aren't you? You know, whether like they.
I was about 12 stone then.
Oh, yeah. Ringing wet.
Smoked most of me. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was like 12 stone, and I have to own it. Yeah, I probably wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
You know, and I would say things about family and really just rile them up. So now we've discussed it. It was probably fair game.
And that, because obviously I used to get a lot of that verbal abuse. You know, people saying things about my family and stuff like that. And at the beginning, because that fire's always been in me, so automatically you'd want to react, and I did.
Of course, yeah.
Like I'd get wound up, you know, but very, very soon, I quickly realised, water off the duck's back.
And I suppose, you know, being in custody, so you're kind of, you just see people and you just know they didn't do it.
Well, I mean...
Or do you just become kind of desensitised to that and it's nothing to do with me?
No, I just think some people, you know, I could be sat... Because I'd have to do quite often like a cell door watch, and you'd get talking to people or whatever, and their personalities would come across. But people can be very manipulative, can't they? So, you know, even it didn't really matter what I thought about them.
Yeah.
I saw a real wide range of characters in that environment, and 9 times out of 10, people coming in for the more serious crimes were the easiest people to deal with.
We said this the other day.
Yeah, I know. I told you about the time I met a hitman.
Yeah.
And he was the most gentlemanly person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah. People just able to switch that on
Yeah.
and off, you know.
Yeah, and he was at a time, I don't know if you remember this, but they probably still do it, but you used to be able to produce people from prison to further question them for outstanding offences and stuff, called a production order.
Yeah.
And so they were sort of like HOPOs, Home Office Production Orders, you know, and they would sometimes be in for days because there might be quite a few outstanding offences. So you might end up talking to someone for the whole of a night shift or the whole of a late shift, or, you know what I mean? If you're relatively quiet and you had a HOPO in. And I remember talking to this bloke, and he was just fascinating. And he was in for a few days, you know, like I said, he was a hitman. He was serving like life or whatever in prison, but they produced him to discuss some other stuff. And just fascinating.
Yeah, and I think you know, I just thought of something then. You know, and certainly when I work with people, you know, I work with a lot of sex offenders, and I would so we get a ROSH, which is a risk of serious harm. I think. So like a risk assessment, off probation, and I would say I just want to read the risk to professionals. I don't want to read the index offence. And there was a reason I did that. And they said, well, why don't you do that? And I said, I'm going to go in there and work with this guy, and I don't want to know what he did, because I want to give him fair court. You know, I want to give him a fair shot.
Yeah.
You know, and you get the, oh, have you read my index offence? I haven't, you know.
Yeah.
And I explain the reason for that. I don't want to judge you. I just want to work with you on your substance misuse.
Yeah.
You know, I know they're not going to hurt me. I know the risk is fairly minimal. Yeah, and what I was coming to saying was that kind of humanistic approach, where you just treat people unconditional, positive regard.
Yeah, so really early on in starting to work, and I remember there was a traffic officer that said to me that he dealt with everybody as that he'd want his mum to be treated.
Great.
And I was like, I'm going to remember that forever, and I've remembered it for my whole life.
Yeah.
Not that I would have ever treated anyone different, but I thought that's really stuck with me, and it's always stuck with me. And I'll always treat someone the way they treat me anyway.
Yeah.
You know, you get the Hayley you deserve. That's what I always say. But I just think, although you had that luxury of not knowing what the offences were, and we've talked about it before, I'd be booking people in. So you'd be hearing the full circumstances of what people were arrested for. And it's not so much that I'd treat them any different because I'm professional and do a job. It's how it affected me mentally and how it affected me when I then went on to have my own kids.
Okay. Yeah. And we spoke about that the other day, didn't we? On your pod.
Yeah. So I wouldn't treat them any different.
Yeah. What did you say you wanted to do the other day? You wanted to do was it? You said you wanted to do something, and I remained like really on the fence.
Paedophile hunter.
That's what you wanted to do, yeah.
Yeah, paedophile hunter episode.
I thought about that.
Did you?
Yeah.
After I said it, or
well,
or before?
when you said it on the day, I sat on the fence.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to commit to an answer.
Right. Why?
Because I was on camera. Because I didn't have enough time to think about it.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I'd love to get involved in that, but I didn't want to commit, you know, without really thinking about it, going away and thinking about it, or commit to kind of whether I thought it was okay or not okay to do, because I've seen, I think early days when I saw those shows, if we call them that, I thought great, really great, and then what I've seen since then is what I said the other day, vigilantism.
Yeah.
You know, where I've seen vulnerable people that have mental health issues that probably don't really know any better.
Yeah, what I want to do is get someone on the podcast who does that.
Oh, right.
Do you know what I mean?
I'm doing this whole paedophile hunt.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I wouldn't say no, because if it was research from a podcast, you know, but the ones I've seen are very professional.
Yeah.
They're really professional. They're not. You can't. Well, I don't know enough about what they're doing, but the ones I've been watching are sort of like really well set up, and they're working with the police.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're working with them. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, to be honest, it's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And you can't, you know, and they're all cameraed up.
Yeah, I saw, and one I'm thinking of the other day, you know, I'm just like, you've got to be so fucking careful. For me, I was like, I said this on your pod actually, it feels like a bit of a minefield, and I have kids.
Yeah, and this is it, yeah.
I have kids, you know, and
sometimes ignorance is bliss.
It might be that, or it might just
so
be...
the more you do something, the more your eyes are open to something, and without desensitising yourself to it, you know, you are fully exposing yourself to it. But I'm so exposed to it anyway that I'm desensitised, so, you know, I can switch off.
I suppose, you know, and I like I said, I have kids. And when I work with sex offenders, you know, because a lot of the offences that were committed were revolved around crack cocaine use because of how that makes you feel. Right. You know, I would think to myself, what happened to this person to make them do that? And it doesn't make it okay.
Did you ever find out?
And I asked someone I work with, I said, you know, what made you do it? Because we built a relationship, you know, and he was, you know, it was 20 years ago, his offence, and it was a horrific offence, really horrific, you know. And so I was just chatting to him one day, and I said, what made you do that? And he just said, yeah, I was abused, Dan. And it, you know, he kind of just shared it with me, and then what I saw, you know, was, I suppose, and it doesn't make it okay, man. It doesn't make it okay. I really have to say that, and you know, it doesn't make it okay. He was just trying to take his power back.
Right.
You know, and there's no logic in that.
Talked about it on a recent episode of mine. It's called Breaking the Cycle. So quite often, if you've grown up around addiction or drinking, drug use, gambling, domestic violence, quite often children feed into it. So then when they grow up, it's a learnt behaviour. Yeah. So it's this, you know, if you've been abused as a child, there's a statistic behind it, and I don't know what it is, but you will go on to abuse. Yeah. If you've, you know, witnessed your dad beating your mum up, I know there's a statistic behind that you will go on to either think that that's okay to be treated like that or abuse.
It becomes normal, doesn't it?
And it's all about cycle breaking. Yeah. And knowing that it's not okay and how to change it for your own family. Yeah.
I think that's, and again, you know, there's the work, isn't it? That it's important, you know. So yeah, you know, and I suppose I probably did that in essence with the guy that I work with. You know, just try to hear it from him, really. You know, without, you know, without saying it's okay what you did, but just, you know, trying to kind of hear him. You know. And that was difficult because I read the offences eventually, and then I looked at him different. Yeah. I looked at him different, you know.
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, we've spoke before, on and off camera, about, you know, it's made me ill over the years. I've had more therapy than I've had at dinners. Yeah. You know, because it affected my parenting. I didn't let them out my sight. Didn't let them anywhere. You know, one day, they're at Catholic school. One day, my eldest was in reception. He came home and he was like, "We've been to church." I had a full-on meltdown. I was like, went to the school. I was like, he said he's been to church. Who was there? Was he left alone? I'm convinced he's been fiddled with by a priest. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, I was ill. I was really ill. I had counselling through the school about that. I had counselling through the NHS. It wasn't just, that was one incident. You know, there was so many.
Is that because of what you'd seen in the job?
Yeah, I was dealing with sports coaches, teachers, priests every day of the week for sex offences, a mile down the road from where I lived. So why would it be different in my home life?
So then there's this like hypervigilant state where it's like these people are in my area.
So then when I had my own children, I'm just in protect mode constantly. Yeah. I mean, now they're like bigger than me. So, you know, it's I'm not as worried about things, but even still, they've never really sleepover wise. I mean, now they might have a sleepover with their mates and stuff, but 9 times out of 10, I'm like, bring your mates around here. I'd rather you all be under my roof. Yeah. So I can know that you say, and they've got good friends now, you know, and I've met the parents and I've been to the houses and stuff. So I'm confident that if they are going to stop over at a friend's house, you know, I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. But back then, when I was poorly, you know, and like I remember one of them got invited for a sleepover once, and I was like, nah, mate, I don't know you and I don't know your husband. It ain't happening. Yeah.
And
I was as blatant as that as well.
Yeah, it's a fair shout, isn't it?
And as offensive as I came across.
I can imagine you saying, no, I don't know you and I don't know your husband.
Sos, but it ain't happening. Yeah. Something that I just couldn't comprehend at the time, because they, and I still think this now, they're only as safe as when they're with me. Yeah. You know, I mean, their dad's brilliant, of course. You know, we're not together and they stay with him a few times a week and whatnot, and he's great. But I think that mums know best. I do.
think they're...
in my case, anyway.
No,
Yeah.
I totally agree, and there's like that mother instinct. You know.
There's some maternal.
Well,
thing.
and yeah, and it would make good sense, you know, that is, you know, you spend nearly a year longer with them than your husband has.
Yeah.
Because you carried them, you know, so there's a connection there that men just can't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's just that, I don't know what it is, you know. I probably weren't well when I first had my first child. I was very, very anxious then.
Okay.
And I did go back into working in custody for a couple of years. And then I was like, I've got to get out of here.
Okay. Yeah, your priorities.
Yeah, I was still working shifts and
Yeah.
got out in the end. But then I moved on to just dealing with murders every day for 7 years. And funny enough, I was just almost broken at that point, that nothing really affected me that bad. I'd had a lot of therapy at this point, so I was a lot better. Still not 100. It's not as good as I am now, but a lot better.
Become better at processing it and just kind of allow. I suppose for me, you know, and all the stuff I've been mixed up in my using and then subsequent recovery, I just become better at processing stuff, allowing it in a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
You know, and knowing to say, okay, I've had enough. I'm just not going to think about it or look about it. Yeah. So homicide, you went on from custody to homicide.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
like, as a part of me that wants to go straight in and go, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? Like that inquisitive kind of child, but...
Yeah, I've seen some really graphic, horrific murders. Some things that you wouldn't, you know, wish on your worst enemy.
Yeah.
But I think even to a degree, it became a job, you know. It became... The investigative mind, it sort of separated me a little bit. I don't know, I mean, obviously child murders I struggled with.
Yeah.
Very, very much struggled with. Really, really did. Luckily, the team I was working on sort of almost could protect me from it. I remember once there was a lot of body-worn video footage to be viewed of a horrific child murder.
Right.
And a colleague of mine, thankfully, went through every piece of footage and then dished it out. And he just, because he'd seen it all, he just kept the worst ones. So I was sort of shielded from that.
That's good police.
Yeah.
That's good policing.
Because I was really thankful for that, you know, because there's some things you don't need to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of adult murders, well, and all of them, but I mean, yeah, it's been some real horrific
I suppose you
stuff.
just come to a place, and you know, I'm a bit like this with death. You know, like in my using, I woke up and people had just died next to me.
Yeah.
And as a using drug addict, take the drugs. I've watched people die in front of me and just used, you know, so I become really familiar with death. Like, it happens. Maybe in some sense I'm hiding from my guilt there.
Yeah, I think, how did you feel? Like, say if you'd have been next to someone, what would be the first thing that you'd do?
Check their pockets.
Yeah.
Take their drugs.
Yeah.
We might call the ambulance. Yeah, that stuff doesn't haunt me so much.
They'd have done the same to you.
Yeah, that's how it is. That's how it was.
Dog eat dog.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff doesn't haunt me so much as you know, when I see people, one particular person comes to mind, who we just bullied intently as a kid, and he's now a heroin addict sleeping rough on the streets, you know, and you know, because even before I was a drug addict, you know, I was quite a vicious child, not a very nice child, you know. I've probably been hurt a lot, so I was just giving that out, you know, because that's what had happened to me, you know. So.
Do you feel that that's had an impact on how he's ended up?
Yeah. Yeah, we did terrible things to him.
Have you spoke to him?
No.
No.
And God, I'm really fucking going in there. Who's podding who?
It's the Spin Justice effect.
Oh man, we just did bad things to him.
Yeah.
Like really bad things.
And how does that make you feel now?
God, like I'm ashamed of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had learning difficulties as well.
Yeah. And this, I'm sure most people have all got something that they've done or things they've done that they're not proud of, and that's part of learning and growing, isn't it? You know, we can't all have these halos perfectly in place all the time. I've done plenty of things that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
But it's all about sort of moving forward, trying to, you know, make things better if you can.
Yeah.
So,
I suppose, you know, it was like a mixture of, I probably knew better, but didn't think better at the time. And everyone was watching and expecting me and people I was with to be these. Yeah, I was fighting for position within a group of quite, you know, with young men that if they'd seen any weakness would have took the piss out of me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so I was fighting for a position there. So so it was me or him.
Yeah. And this is it, isn't it? There's in those circles and in those worlds, there's a hierarchy. And it's not like now, like these days, like you said at the beginning, I came on your radar 2 months ago, and straight away you sort of went, there's no podcast here. But there's no hierarchy here.
No.
Do you know what I mean? There's enough room for everyone.
Yeah.
But obviously in different worlds, it's not like that.
No.
Yeah.
And it takes a bit of like, so straight away there's the fear mentality, isn't it? The fear, you know, and then really you just realise actually there's, you know.
I always like to look at every, because I know what you mean. Like, if, you know, someone said to me the other day, there's a new spin instructor on the scene, you know, and I'll straight away you think, what are they doing?
Yeah.
You know, which is good. But I am always telling myself, collaborate, don't compete.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's collaboration happens at the top, competing happens at the bottom.
I like that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what I like to keep in mind all the time. There's enough room for everyone.
Yeah, and we've been, you know, the studio manage my. I say manage my profile like I'm something I'm not, but they do kind of say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we've been doing a lot of collabing, and the views have jumped up. Where were they at when I did yours?
3.6 million.
5.2 million.
What?
I know. Fuck knows what happened.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You got to work the algorithm.
Yeah.
And you got to collaborate.
I was chatting with Erin about it earlier on today, and it's like because your name's being mentioned, you're appearing here, there, and everywhere, and so the collaboration really does work, and I'm an advocate of it now.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's enough to go around.
Oh, absolutely. I had a voice note before I come out off my cousin, and she was like, Hayley, everywhere I look, you are everywhere I look. And I'm like, because it's not the podcast, it's the spin.
Yeah.
You know, because I do a lot of sort of promotional content every now and then release them like once a week or whatever, drip feed them out so people can see what I'm doing on the bike or, you know, stuff like that. So if you know, in a certain circle, you will see. But that's just how it is, isn't it? I think. How do you feel about like putting yourself out there a lot?
Yeah, like my ego loves it, like, you know, because that's how I'm built. My sponsor tells me that it needs deflating, and then someone said to me the other day, you should get that in yesterday, your ego's going to kill you. and we laugh, and you know, I suppose in a recovery sense they'll fucking love this because they will tell me the same. You know, my sponsor said, move quietly, Dan. Stop putting yourself out there, because I was like, I'm really struggling. You know, when I first came back off my relapse, I was like, I'm really struggling to find my humility. He says, that's because you're fucking putting yourself out there all the time. And then I kind of explained, actually, you know, there's a point to this, is to generate a passive income, you know, hopefully at some point.
Exactly. And we've all got bills to pay.
Yeah, and I want to get paid for it, you know, and that's kind of where I'd like it to head. Yeah, so, you know, And he said to me, what do you do with all the comments? And I said, I don't really read them. I might read the odd one or two, but I tend to stay away from them now because there's just too much information.
Do I read the comments? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm too busy.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't have time to keep up. You see, the thing with my platforms, Carl manages a lot of them. I don't even have the login details.
It's nice.
So I don't, certain platforms. I run the Instagram.
Yeah.
That's about as much as I can manage. Yeah. I can't keep up with it. I can't keep up with, doing as much sort of networking as I'd like. So reading comments, I mean, I never respond to negativity.
Oh, I get into it sometimes.
I just don't feed the toxicity.
I hear myself going, don't respond, don't get into it. And then I think, no, fuck yeah, you're having it today.
Yeah, and there is that part of me that if someone was sat in front of me doing it, yeah, but 9 times out of 10, if someone was sat in front of you, they wouldn't say it.
No.
And that's why I just don't feed it, because I'm very, very busy.
I haven't had that much negativity, actually. I get the odd stuff around the 12-step fellowship.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be doing this. It's anonymous, and dare I say anything now, because I'll get a load of comments about it. I get into it about that. Someone called me, someone commented one day and said, the self-seeking will soon desist.
Oh, right.
I thought, fuck off, mate. He's my friend as well. Twat. He's watching that, you twat, Paul.
Yeah, I think, there was something, Ginge from Shard End?
I don't know.
Right,
I'm trying to get him on the pod.
Right, so he came on to my podcast a few months ago.
How did you get him on?
Just messaged him and said, mate,
did you pay him?
Oh, I'm not going to say.
All right, fair enough. That's a yes.
And I messaged him and I said, will you come on? And he came on and we had a great chat. Really got a lot of time for him. And we've stayed in touch since.
Yeah.
He's called me several times, voice note each other, share each other's stuff on social media and that. But he said, and I've never, it was only a couple of months ago, but he said, be a creator, not a consumer.
Okay.
So, with sort of like the comments and stuff, I'm not consuming that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because there's no such thing as bad press.
No, there isn't.
5.2 million views.
Yeah, from
what you want.
From shooting up some crystal meth.
Yeah, and but everyone loves a car crash.
Everyone loves a car crash. Yeah, so there is no such thing as bad press.
Yeah,
I think I'm testimony to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah.
I'm not bothered by it. I couldn't give a fuck. I'm just like, fuck them. If there's anyone's got anything bad to say, it's the same as offending people, isn't it? Big debate at the minute, in another world of mine, about offending people. So what? So who cares? You're going to die from being offended.
Yeah. And the question is, actually, if I'm offended, is there a little bit of truth in that?
Who cares?
Maybe. Yeah,
Actually, there's not much that offends me.
Yeah.
Do you know? Not a lot. I've got a very dark sense of humour. I can have the bants, and there isn't a lot that will offend me. If there's something I don't like, or there's something I don't agree with, or negatively comment, I'll just move on. Whereas some people can't help it, can they? But I just think, fuck them.
Yeah. No, yeah, there are some. Yeah, I've had 1 or 2 trolls.
There's nothing keeping me awake at night, I'll tell you that.
Oh no, I'll sleep all right. Maybe the kids wake me up, but
yeah.
mine
don't. Mine have 2 big now.
What were we talking about? Homicide.
Homicide investigations.
So take it away.
What do you want to talk about? Worst ones?
Yeah, worst ones. Did you ever meet? Because I see some people. I've seen some people, maybe they're in shitty relationships, and this is gonna not go down so well. And children have died, and I've seen the partners, and we're talking about domestic abuse, and you really think, I look at some of them women in those relationships and think, although they're guilty of the crime, really they probably had no idea what they were getting into.
We're talking about parents that have killed children, or
But let's just, and you may have some cases that you remember, but the men have led on the crime, so to speak. You know, the women have been what's the word I'm looking for? Participants. But really because, I'm thinking of one or two where I think she probably doesn't know any better.
So I think like I've worked on a few cases like that. There's a few that come to mind. And sometimes, there's that many in my mind. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I think, oh my God, I forgot about that one, or I forgot about that one, I forgot about that one. And it's just because there's that many sort of like murders or, all murders to be honest, or bodies, that you forget about them.
Yeah.
Which is horrible, really, isn't it? That there's that many in there. Like, where are they in my mind? Because when you've said that, that's jogged a memory and it's brought a couple to mind. Do you know what I mean? But I think vulnerabilities within relationships are, that's a real thing. From a parenting perspective, I would kill for my children.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Oh, yeah. No, and you'd take the sentence. Yeah, no, it sounds. Yeah.
All day, every day. So if someone did something to my children, I've no problem killing for them.
I'm thinking, I watched a documentary a little while ago on the Ian Huntley murders.
Oh, yeah. And
it was the Maxine Carr documentary.
I watched it.
And I watched that documentary and I came away and I thought, okay, no shadow of a doubt, she knew what had happened and was wrong. But was she so coerced and controlled in that relationship that she really just, I suppose looking at it now, she probably maybe looks back and thinks, I should have done this.
Yeah,
I should have done that.
She was very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think that probably reflected in the sentence, didn't it? Without knowing the full ins and outs of the case, she didn't get a very big sentence, did she?
No.
And she came out with sort of a change of identity, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
So I think there was, it probably reflected in the outcome.
Yeah.
But I did watch it, and it was interesting. I remember reading a book written by the dad of Hayley Owens, back sort of nearer the time, back sort of in the early 2000s when it happened. And it was really interesting. I remember being quite interested in that case.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't working on homicide then. But yeah, I think that is a good example. She was probably very controlled by him.
Yeah.
He was a dangerous man. He should never have got that job.
No.
And there's laws have come about since then. Is it the Bishard inquiry that came about as a result?
I'm not familiar with it.
Because he should never have got a job as a caretaker in a school.
Yeah.
But, learning along the way means that hopefully will never happen again. But yeah, I don't really like to think about the child ones. But there's been some very gruesome ones, shall we say. And lots of, like you say, lots of suspicious deaths, which were actually probably drug users overdosing.
Yeah.
Or, but because of the circumstances in how they've been found, it's come across as suspicious when in actual fact it probably isn't.
Yeah. I was just yeah. Yeah, and there are I think I was just thinking about drug use deaths, and there's always that, and I don't know if this is kind of on the business end, custody side, people, are they, if someone dies of a drug overdose, I know plenty of people that have died of drug overdoses. I'm not sure what I'm kind of trying to say here, and they're just kind of treated as less serious. I know people that were found overdose, but were probably in fact, just suspicious. Suspicious,
Yeah, sometimes, because if there's, you read, don't you, that there's a male's been found dead and it's not being treated suspicious at this time, because that's sometimes very clear that they've killed themselves through, suicide.
Well, it's a good way to off someone.
Or they've overdosed on drugs, or
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you read, don't you, reports? You can tend to read between the lines based on how things are worded.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's because I've been on the inside of
Yeah,
it.
I was gonna. Yeah.
So you tend to be able to work out what's happened without knowing the full ins and outs. But yeah, I mean, just going back to sort of like other jobs. See, this is it. You call it a job. It's not. That's someone's life. But that's what it became. You'd come into work. There's a job in.
Yeah.
There's a job in,
Yeah.
and then you would literally go into your sort of investigative mind where you'd think, what do I need? Depending where you're going to be going. Are you going to a scene? Are you going to do house-to-house inquiries? Are you going to do a CCTV trawl? Is it pissing down with rain? Do you need a big coat or your wellies? Do you know what I mean? I remember going once into sort of like a nature reserve at like 2 a.m. to a body that had been found, and it was pissing down with rain, and like I've had to like get my wellies on and like trudge through the mud to like sort of a body that he had actually killed himself, but it was, you know, a body had been found in a nature reserve, so sort of we went out to that.
I was just, sorry to interrupt. Did I interrupt you? Or were you finishing?
No.
God, what was the question? Fucking hell. It's gone.
You asked about, some...
I had a really good question in my head. I was like, fucking hell, man. Help me out, fill in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you'd go into investigative mind, you know, you wouldn't, it was a job. It's bad to think of it that way. And sometimes you'd have to use dark humour to get you through it.
Yeah.
I mean...
The questions come back to me.
Go on.
Were any like real surprises where you were like, just really, just really shocked that maybe who'd killed someone, or, you know, so you've kind of got this investigation laid out in front of you, and you've kind of had it all pinned on one person, and all the evidence would point at them. I don't know, evidence doesn't necessarily work like that, but then it's just totally flipped and been like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Not really, but there's been some definite like twists in terms of sometimes, you know, someone has done it, and then they get a not guilty at court.
Wow, yeah, and that's through lack of evidence.
It's not, or maybe the way it's been presented, or loopholes.
Yeah.
You know, okay. and I mean, I was starting to sort of lose faith in the criminal justice system quite early on, to be honest. But it is like a game. It is like you've got to play the game.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just talk like we're talking now in court. It's got to all, you know, be presented in a certain way, you know, and it's like a game.
So, okay, so, yeah, I was just thinking of... I wanted to go back to the kind of DV and the domestic violence, because Chris, you know, who's my friend who passed away, you know, he's who we're raising money for at the minute, you know about that.
Yeah.
And you donated.
I did
anonymously,
donate.
But not so much anonymous anymore.
Not so much anonymous now, we've talked about it on here, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you know, his dad did, I think, 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Domestic murder of his partner?
15 times with a knife, and you know, I think about the same amount of times with a hammer.
Really?
Yeah, you know, and really premeditated in terms of.
And quite frenzied by the sound of it.
Frenzied attack, yeah.
Was that? Did he? Was it a loss of control that he claimed, or?
I don't know. I spoke to Chris, you know, about it at length, and he tried to do the same to someone else 3 weeks before.
Oh, okay.
And they'd sectioned him and released him.
Right.
And then he did that, and then, you know, he was sectioned and came out, you know, able to be treated in the community. And then he tried to do the same to someone else. So he
was a failing there.
Yeah, so he was given an indefinite sentence at that point, you know, for trying to do the same to someone else, life sentence. You know.
Was there a review done of that? You know.
I'm not entirely sure, you know, and I'm only going off what I've been told, so I've done no fact checking on it before everyone else jumps on me.
Yeah. It's just that, like, I've seen a lot of this happen, you know, where not necessarily domestic, but where there's been a mental health issue. prevalent and it's caused murders.
Yeah.
I've seen people beheaded, you know, eyes gouged out, you know,
Yeah.
real like through mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, the closest sort of psychiatric hospital to here or to the area is Rayside, and that's, you know, featured heavily throughout the career. You know, it was just a not normal but common theme.
I was in treatment with a guy, you know, when I first, I've done a few rehabs. First one I went to, he'd killed a man whilst he was drunk.
Okay.
And woke up and didn't know he killed someone. You know, really nice guy. Done his full life term. You know, but yeah, just a nice guy.
Scary, isn't it, that? Because
Yeah.
I've got so pissed before that I've, you know, woke up and not remembered loads of stuff. You know, don't remember getting back, don't remember certain points, and it scares you. Then you know, you get the sort of anxiety the next day where you're in the horrors and you think, "Fuck, what have I done?"
No, I don't drink, so.
You don't drink. Yeah.
I never have done.
Well,
you know,
I've not been, have I, for a few months?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. No, crack cocaine's not really like that.
Yeah.
Or heroin, to be honest.
You still remember what you're doing?
Trying to think. No. So maybe, yeah. No anxiety because I don't remember what I've done. But
But that must be a horrible feeling.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
to wake up.
If
Yeah.
you wake up, maybe in a cell or whatever, and think, what the fuck has happened? How have I got here? You know, like that must be such a horrible
and for
feeling.
them to tell you why you're there, and
Yeah.
that, I suppose you would be the first port of call as a custody officer.
Yeah, like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, what am I doing here? Any cases like that at all? Where,
Oh definitely, and people that have killed others, and
no idea that-
no recollection of it.
Wow.
And actually, to a degree where you'd believe them, you know, because you could easily say you didn't believe something, because who's going to ever know whether you do or you don't? Do you know what I mean? But to a point where the sincerity and the devastation of what you've done is sincere, you know.
Yeah, fucking hell, man.
So I've definitely dealt with stuff like that. Some real like borderline serial killing, real dangerous offenders, you know, from a range really. There's a few floating around in my head. You know, one sort of rapist that went on to kill.
And did you go on? You were going to say something.
No, go on, because it's.
Did you work in the same custody suite or
No.
did you move around?
I worked at Rose Road in Harborne for like 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. About
So
7
did you
years.
see the same offenders come in and an escalation in the offences?
Sometimes,
Yeah, okay,
sometimes,
yeah.
because some of them would come in as like young offenders.
Yeah.
You know, and then like they grow up, and then, you know, you might see them 10 years later.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Some like you do tend to have your regulars, as you would call it, in.
Yeah.
Back then there was quite a big prostitution problem on that area that I worked, so we'd get quite a lot of brasses in, you know, that we used to call them back then, and I used to get on great with most of them. Some of them could be quite a handful, you know, because especially if you're having to strip search them and they're concealing and stuff like that, and that, you know, you might end up fighting with them, but the majority you'd have a great time with them.
Just check where we're at. Where are we at with the time?
Half past.
Are we at an hour?
Yes, please, half.
Oh, fucking hell. All right, thank you. All right, so we'll wrap it up. Do you think policing is better now than it was when you first started?
That's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, back in the early 2000s versus now, honestly, no.
Okay.
And that is because...
Yeah, I was going to say why.
Yeah, and my opinion on that, and it is only my opinion, is... well, I think actually this is a statistic. I think 75% of the force now have got less than 3 years service.
Okay.
So there's not the experience there was.
Yeah, got you.
You know, because people are realising that, you know, people used to join for 30 years.
Yeah.
They'd do their 30 years, probably at the age of 18, retire at 48 with a decent pension, and then probably go on and get a part-time driving job or doing something, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas now, people aren't staying because the public sector is a very, very hard place to work.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, if my boys came home and said to me, I want to join the police, I'd say over my dead body.
You wouldn't have?
Fuck, would I?
Fair enough.
Because you don't get paid enough money for what you have to do, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
You know, the shifts and the stuff you're exposed to and the abuse and, you know, all of that, you don't get paid enough.
I knew a police officer, and I won't say who or where from, because it would give it away, but yeah, he'd been a long time in the police. Yeah, he was quite high ranking. Fucking absolutely, you know, just the most racist person. Not the most racist, but he was racist. And then the person, I'm really trying to be cryptic about this because it will totally give it away, you know, was always on at him about, you can't say that, you can't do that. The person close to him, I was close to them. And I said, you know, that's his experience.
Yeah, I
You
think...
know, that's what he's experiencing every day, you know, and it doesn't make it okay what he did.
No.
But every time he went on shift, those were the people that were attacking him, those were the people that were trying to stab him.
Oh, okay,
you know,
right, I see what you're
so
saying,
I could see where his angle was at, but it
Right.
didn't make it okay, you know, and anyone that knows me knows I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, same. And I just think, like, there's certain things, like I said to you, I'm not easily offended at all. And it's not so much that I'd be like, oh, I'm so offended, but, like, in my world, there is no place for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
but, and this is just, again, a culture shift, isn't it? It's just a big shift. Things are different now.
Yeah.
I think, like, just going back to how policing was then,
Yeah.
there was a lot more neighbourhood policing going on.
Yeah.
You know, like, I hate to say it, but like as a working class person, you know, I can understand why confidence in policing is low.
Yeah.
I can totally relate.
Yeah. Hence why the paedophile hunter vigilantes do so well.
Yeah.
Because I get it. You know, it's like, if you're not going to sort it, we'll sort it.
Yeah, but I think the ones, like I say, the ones that I've been looking at are really professional. You know,
I would hope so, yeah.
Yeah, really professional. And they're wearing body-worn video for everything.
Yeah.
And they're not talking to them, you know, with any disrespect to a degree, you know. I watched one the other day where it was like, sorry, we're going off next to the time, but
Okay.
I watched one the other day where they were challenging someone over his contact with a 13-year-old girl. He's an adult. And he said, I felt lonely. And they sort of went, well, there's times in my life that I felt lonely, mate, but I've not gone online and spoke to a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
You know, so they're not sort of talking to him with disrespect, but they're challenging him.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And these are sort of some of the things that I've been looking at recently. It's not in any way... I don't like... I find it uncomfortable to watch sort of abuse of any kind.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I'm there too.
Yeah, so if they were, like, ripping him, like, you know, it's probably not going to be comfortable viewing for me.
Yeah.
But the way it's been handled, or the way it's being handled, in my opinion, is quite good.
Yeah. No. And I suppose, that's kind of, you know, I'm sort of pro that more than I am the other stuff, you know. I think, okay, there's a place for that.
Yeah.
And again, I suppose if it's handled correctly, and I'll finish on this because I know Ibs is desperate for us to get out. If it's handled correctly and dealt with well, that's quality evidence. Do you know what I mean? You know, that if whoever's, because that, you know, what they're filming would present as part of the evidence.
Yeah.
And you know, and when that's viewed in a court,
Yes.
then comes across as quality evidence rather than just, okay, what he's done is wrong, but the people that are catching him are not necessarily of the best quality.
Yeah, because they phone the police, don't they? And they say, you are going to be arrested now.
Yeah.
You know, they explain it all on camera. You are going to be arrested. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then they pass it over to the police. So, like, you know, I presume that's sort of...
It would be used as evidence,
Yeah. Is this going to have to be a part 2, like Subsies?
No. I think we're good.
I watched that the other day.
Did you? Oh yeah, we've got this. I don't know. I'm not going to say anything. I love Subsidy. I think he's great. Okay, that's us.
Yeah, thanks
very much.
Thanks very much.
We talked about nothing we spoke about on the phone, but that
It's life.
Happened, and I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
All right, lovely. Thanks very much.